What's up, you guys? It's Cody. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for being here. Today, I'm going to talk about why new music is released on Fridays and if you should be releasing your music on Fridays as well. It feels like since I started releasing music that it's always come out on Fridays, and I've always wondered how come Friday is when new music is released. Is it because of the streaming platforms and their playlists? Is it because of major record labels and they're deciding? So today, I'm going to break down the history of why new music is released on Fridays and whether or not you should be releasing your new music on Fridays as well. As always, if you find a video like this helpful, don't forget to drop me a like down below. Helps this video get seen by many more people and really helps out me and my channel more than you possibly know, so thank you in advance. All right, so jumping right into the fun stuff, let's start with a history lesson. Well, Fridays weren't always the norm for new music releases. It actually used to be Tuesdays in the United States. Other countries around the world, like the UK and Canada, saw new music being released on Mondays. So new music being released on Fridays hasn't always been the norm. They used to be released on Tuesdays back when physical CDs and vinyl records were more popular. But since we have seen a switch to streaming platforms, new music has been coming out on Fridays. Now, there was no real reason as to why music started getting released on Fridays. The thought was that physical albums used to get shipped out over the weekend to be released for their release week, and so some shops will get them Monday, others will get them Tuesday, and there was no set date on when they'd be released. So major music labels decided that, to be fair to every distributor, that music would get released on Tuesday, whether or not they had it in stock before or not. But some countries like the UK and Canada were able to release their music on Mondays. Now, this raised a lot of piracy issues, especially in a time where piracy was very popular in the music industry and not a lot of people were streaming or buying albums. People in the UK would buy music early on Monday and upload it to peer-to-peer sharing platforms where people around the world would be able to illegally download this music and listen to it for free before it was released in their country. So this system of Tuesdays was obviously flawed and it wasn't working, but thankfully music platforms have cut down on piracy and illegally downloading music so heavily. So thank you Spotify and Apple Music and all the streaming platforms for doing that. You're really helping out us artists so much. Now, music being released on Tuesdays started to change in 2013. We first saw Beyonce release her surprise album on a Friday, which was the first of her kind. She didn't announce it, she just dropped this album one day, and it was seriously one of the craziest things the music industry had ever seen. She didn't promote it, she didn't advertise it, just all of a sudden it was available exclusively on iTunes, and it caught everybody off guard. It ended up breaking a ton of records with how many purchases it got on iTunes, and it's one of the reasons that Beyonce is the queen. She entirely reshaped the music industry, or at least started reshaping it, with this one release. Now, this was just the start of a new trend, and we didn't see a lot of changes right away, but we started to see major artists push the boundaries and start to experiment with release days other than just Tuesdays. And it wasn't until 2015 where the music industry finally decided that Fridays was going to be the official release date for music. Not only did many major labels agree that this was the best day for them to release, but Billboard charts changed their reporting week to start on Fridays and end on Thursdays, when it previously was Tuesdays until Mondays. Now, this meant that any artist who wanted to get a full 7 days of charting in their first week had to release music on Friday. And this is such a major thing for all of the big artists in the world, and more importantly, the big record labels. They want their releases to be #1 or be in the top 10 for however many weeks or be in the top 100. And this is ways that they show growth in their artists and have achievements as a record label themselves. This can help bring a lot of additional attention to the artist and help them push that album even harder. There's a lot of streaming playlists that cover the Billboard charts and a lot of radio stations that play whatever charts in Billboard as well. So this helps these artists and these record labels get that music exposed to so many more people. A lot of major record labels also track their own performance based on where their artists are in the Billboard charts. It's essentially just a bunch of big record labels with way too much money playing the chart game and figuring out who has the most market share in those charts. It's 100% silly and all business, and it takes away from the music, but nonetheless it does happen, and it is what major record labels do. Everybody wants to be #1 and everybody's fighting for the highest spot. So if a record label can say I have 10 of my artists in the Billboard top 100s, then that is major clout for them, and that record label is going to be recognized as a higher tier record label than some of their other competitors. Now, another major reason why music is being released on Fridays is due to the increase in music streaming and music streaming platforms. Major streaming platforms like Apple Music and Spotify update all of their music playlists on Fridays. Many artists get a ton of success through being playlisted on these music services. It gets their music heard by more people and really gets their song familiar in their listeners' head. And artists and record labels are working very hard to get their songs in these playlists. It's especially beneficial if they are able to get their songs in these playlists right away on the day the song comes out. That way their first week numbers are gonna be higher, and the way that the playlist algorithm works, it's gonna actually put them in more and better playlists as time progresses. And overall, it's gonna help them get more listeners for the artist and more streams behind that album or release. Now, major streaming services with their playlists and with them curating and deciding who gets playlisted are kind of the gatekeepers in a sense, or tastemakers if you want to call them. They decide what music is going to be heard by their subscribers. If you're a Spotify user and listen to any of your algorithmic playlists like your Release Radar or your Discover Weekly, this is Spotify choosing music that they want you to listen to. So if you're an artist that gets put on one of these playlists, you're going to have Spotify pushing your music to more people and doing half of the promotional work for you. This helps artists and their music streams so incredibly much, and it's something that helps a lot of smaller artists as well. Smaller artists don't necessarily have the opportunity to get heard by as many people, but if they end up getting playlisted in one of Apple Music's or Spotify's playlists, they have an opportunity to reach so many people than they would just on their own. This is kind of a case of what came first, the chicken or the egg. Artists are releasing music on Fridays because playlists are updated on Fridays. So more artists release on Fridays, and these playlists continue to get updated on Fridays. It's kind of a back and forth, and it's going to take a lot of work if anybody wants to change this. But for the time being, we are firmly locked in as Fridays being the day of release. Now, a lot of this still relates back to tradition. Streaming is still incredibly young relative to the history of music, and it's very much following the physical era. We still follow the tradition that artists are going to be releasing full-length albums on a Friday, and their first week stats are going to help them chart through Billboard or through Spotify playlisting. And I don't necessarily see this being the case forever. I think this is something that we have adapted from the physical era, from CDs and vinyl, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it can't be changed. However, for the time being, as long as it's still considered the industry standard to release on Friday, I don't see that changing. If it's the industry standard, that means that's what all the major artists and record labels are doing. And if that's what the major artists and record labels are doing, that's because it's working. And as a smaller artist, you want to be doing what's working as well. So it only makes sense to continue releasing your music on Fridays just like all the majors do. Now the real question is, will this ever change? Is music always going to be released on Fridays? And I think the answer is yes, this will change. Now it's almost impossible to speculate when or what it will be changed to or how things are going to go in the future. I mean, I don't even know if music streaming is still going to be popular in 10 years. Things change very fast, and nobody knows what the future holds. But I think one place we have already noticed a lot of change is through a lot of independent musicians. We don't necessarily see the same full-length albums released like we used to. There's a lot more singles and a lot more smaller EPs with only 3 or 4 songs on there. I recently did a video on why I think musicians should stop making albums, and I'll link that down below if you want to check that out. Now, if musicians are releasing their music in a different format and not necessarily a full-length album, that doesn't necessarily mean that following the traditional structure is going to be what's best for them. We've seen a lot of independent musicians and rappers who follow a lot more of a single-based release approach rather than a full-length album mess around and experiment and challenge the release dates. Smaller artists have the creative control and power to be different and challenge the norms and experiment with new things. I think this is such a massive benefit to being an unsigned and independent artist, is that you have 100% freedom with what you want to do and you don't have to follow these old school traditional norms. While typically most people are releasing on Fridays, there are still a lot of musicians who choose to release on different days of the week for whatever reason. And unless we try new things, we're always going to be stuck with the same old thing, which is working for right now, but might not be the best option. Now, another reason I could see it changing, or maybe why releasing on Friday might not be best for you, is if all major artists are releasing on a Friday, then it's going to be very busy and very backed up with new music releases. And it might be harder for you as a smaller artist to get your music heard. If Sam Smith, Lady Gaga, and Justin Timberlake are all releasing music on the same Friday you want to release your album, very low chance that people are going to take the time to listen to your music instead of one of their favorite artists. So maybe it's more opportune for smaller artists and independent artists to focus on other days where it's not as busy and it's not as oversaturated. Maybe if you release on a Monday or a Tuesday, you might have the opportunity to fight through the crowd on these less busy release days and get your music heard by more people. The last reason I could see release days changing is because of all the music data and stats that we have available. Me personally, as a smaller artist, I'm able to go onto my Spotify for Artists page or my Apple Music for Artists page and see all of the stats. I can see exactly when people are listening, what people are listening to, what songs are doing well, what songs aren't doing so well. And I can pull all that information together to figure out which release day is gonna work best for me. If I notice that I get the most amount of listeners on Wednesdays, then why wouldn't I wanna release my music on a Wednesday and not have to battle with everybody releasing on Fridays? Plus, if I'm not worried about charting on Billboard, then what's the point of having a full 7 days to chart within? So maybe your best bet is to challenge the norm and to release music on another day. I'm really curious, what do you think your approach is? Are you gonna continue to release music on Fridays, or have you thought about switching it up in the past? Drop me a comment down below and let me know. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to drop a like down below and subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss out on any more of my videos. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one.